Well, everybody, I'm going to read this short introduction on Betsy. You may have read it in the newsletter, but for the benefit of everybody, I thought I'd read it again, just as a little introduction for Betsy. Betsy Wilson will explore the world of still life photography through her unique perspective, a combination of traditional still life subjects, nature's fascinating still subjects, and a few whimsical and unusual creations. Betsy's still lifes provide studies in composition and lighting. Unlike landscape or street photography, the photographer is in complete control of subject matter, composition, shape, color, depth of field, lighting, and presentation. The true skill lies in the ability to take something mundane and everyday out of its normal habitat and transform it into something of beauty by using our skills as photographers. Betsy began learning photography after retiring from a career as a newspaper publisher 10 years ago. Her husband, Jim, gave her his hand-me-down camera and a lot of encouragement, and she has never looked back. So I'm going to stop there and let Betsy take over. And I encourage everybody to please look at her website. She has done amazing work in the last 10 years. So take it away, Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everybody, please mute.
Slideshow from beginning. How's that? Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Look good.
Beautiful.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you very much. As you said, both Jim, my husband, Jim, and I, we're also active members of the Chester County Camera Club. And we had also belonged to Upper Euclid Camera Club. That's where we met Bob Gross. But we joined Berks Photo Society last year during the lockdown because we were so impressed with your lineup of speakers. So thank you, Jay, for inviting me to participate, and jump in if the sound or video needs attention. Feel free to ask questions. If you ask a question in the chat, I tend not to see it. So Jay or someone would have to show that to me. I will take a pause about halfway through, and that might be a good time for questions, but if there's something you want to ask right away, feel free. So first, I just want to introduce you to a member of the Chester County Camera Club. This is Anita, and she is in charge of programs for our club. And I think all camera clubs have an Anita, a really sweet, gentle, kind of unintimidating person by appearance. Doesn't she look like a sweet grandmother? But don't mess with Anita. And when she asks you to do something, you dare not say no to Anita. And Anita asked me to do a presentation to the Chester Club on still lifes. Well, the year before, she had asked me to do a presentation to the club on motion photography. And it was a lot of fun. I talked about freezing action, such as this blue heron in flight using a fast shutter speed, or using a slow shutter speed to record movement of headlights and taillights. A motion technique called panning to both freeze motion and blur it in the same frame. Just really cool stuff. And other techniques to capture motion. So motion is exciting, it's dynamic, it's fun. So why did Anita ask me to create a presentation on still lifes? Still lifes don't move. They're about motionless things. Dead things. So, well, I had experimented somewhat with still lifes, and I suspect that's the reason Anita asked me to talk about this subject. And I remember Anita commented on this image I took at a club outing. Maybe she thought I had a talent for photographing dried up leaves and dead spiders. Or maybe she knew that I have a habit of collecting discarded nests and empty robin's eggs when I go for woodland walks. Or that I like to photograph broken things, whatever. But a whole presentation on still lifes, I thought, how can I fill an hour of images with fruit baskets? And I knew this would be a tough challenge. So, hey, thanks, Anita. And I must admit, I wasn't exactly sure what qualified as a still life. So first stop on my journey, Wikipedia. Still life is a work of art of mostly inanimate subjects that are natural, such as food and flowers, or man-made, such as books, maybe vases. And over the course of my research, I photographed all of these things. And the term still life is derived from the Dutch word still even. And other countries actually use terms that mean dead nature. So before I know it, I'm at the library taking out books. I'm researching the beginnings and the history of still life. I'm spending a lot more time at the library than I anticipated. Thanks, Anita. But I must admit, it was actually pretty interesting. So still lifes like this were found in ancient burial sites, and they depicted scenes of everyday life. Well, everyday life, I think you can see my mouse here. I didn't know they had snow cones way back then. It was 3,000 years later in the 16th century that the still life gained recognition as an accepted art form. Caravaggio used strong contrast between light and dark, known as chiaroscuro. And now I'm loving the sculptural look, and I start to look more and more at still life paintings. Now we fast forward to the 19th century. Cézanne is considered the greatest master of still life painting, and this work is his most celebrated. So just look at the exquisite composition, the movement, the color. This painting is the most expensive still life ever sold at an auction. It went for over $60 million. And Van Gogh's Sunflowers, I think perhaps the most famous still life of all. I grow sunflowers in my garden. You think I can create something like this? So studies in composition and lighting. So now I start to research different types of still lifes. And there's found still life or created still life. And the subject matter can be either natural or man-made. So found still life and natural still lifes has actually always been a favorite of mine. I just never really thought of them as still lifes, because photographing nature has opened my eyes to see the beauty all around us. I now notice texture and shape, color and patterns, and it's everywhere, like this close-up of a cactus. So when you are walking down your favorite mountain trail and run across fallen leaves in a nice pattern, that's a found still life. If you photograph it as is, it's a found still life. And I like to sit in the grass on a misty morning and just wait, and the beauty will appear. You will find your natural still life. Or sometimes I don't go find items, they come find me. You know, most dinner guests bring a bottle of wine. My friends bring me dead things like this hornet's nest. So man-made found still lifes, what treasures we can find just by walking around and observing, such as in a store window. A still life can be anything, a rusty lock on a crypt. And Jay, you mentioned Laurel Hill Cemetery. This was taken at Laurel Hill Cemetery. Collections of old stuff create interesting modular compositions. And museums include lots of fascinating still life subjects, such as the Martin Guitar Factory in Nazareth. Gloves and a wrench, gears and rusty pipes. These were taken at an abandoned silk mill and are examples of found still lifes. So created still lifes are a great way to learn about color, light, composition in a controlled environment. And I think this is what we all picture when one says the word still life. So when I start to read about the disciplines involved with still lifes, because with created still lifes, the photographer makes the picture rather than takes the picture. So unlike landscape or street photography, where you are waiting for a beautiful sunset or waiting for an interesting person to walk down the street, with still lifes, you, the photographer, are now in complete control. Perhaps you want to tell a story. We found these glasses and this British passport that belonged to Jim's grandfather in a leather briefcase in the attic. And then there's something in between found and created still lifes. So maybe you stumble upon a scene of interest, but you add a little creativity of your own. This is in that abandoned silk mill. And it was a cold November day. Snow was flying in these broken windows. The broken glass and the leaves were there, but I just kind of repositioned them to put a composition that I liked. I sort of made this gentle curve take place here. And these rows of machinery on this old wooden floor were quite photogenic. The leading lines, the repetition, but I added the shoes in the foreground to convey a sense of the people who worked there every day. And beautiful light came in this old window. I positioned the chair, an old umbrella, and a pair of red shoes to create a personality in a scene with nobody in it. And we saw this one already, but this was taken at the barn at the Kerner Farm in Chadds Ford. You're probably all familiar with the artist Andrew Wyeth. Well, the Kerner Farm is one of the locations he used for many of his paintings. And one of the amazing things we can learn from Andrew Wyeth is that art subjects can be found anywhere. You don't need to travel. He created thousands of paintings and drawings just within a few-mile radius of his home in Chadds Ford. So while at the place where he created so many amazing paintings, I decided to look for beauty in the ordinary. This is Anna Kerner's trunk in an upstairs bedroom. And I love the patterns inside the trunk, on the linoleum floor, the wallpaper, even the glue on the wall where the wallpaper peeled off. And an old truck door in the barn. And Andrew Wyeth found beauty in simplicity, which inspires me to create simple still lifes. I like the beautiful soft light on this apple that I actually just placed on a white painted mantle. It's still in the Kerner farmhouse. And continuing in the spirit of Andrew Wyeth, Jim and I managed to get into the cupola of a historic home in Chadds Ford, where Wyeth created many more of his paintings. We brought the skeleton, and you can actually see the paint splatters on the floor from Andrew Wyeth's palette. This is the reason we brought the skeleton. We were trying to create a similar image of his painting called Dr. Sin. And here's my attempt. So not exactly the same, but we had a lot of fun experimenting with this. It was a really cool place. So close-ups, a great way to create stunning still lifes. And it works very well with natural subjects. And I started to become more enamored with the traditional still life subjects of flowers and fruit. You know, fruit, endless possibilities. And as I studied more and more examples, the more I became excited about the beauty of simple composition, shape, color, and light. Here's a simple apple, two very different still lifes. So for a while, I was on a fruit and vegetable kick, a partially peeled tangerine, cherries in natural light, and sometimes I like to spritz the subject with a spray bottle just to add some interest. And this was done on black plexiglass to create that reflection. A close-up of strawberries. The simplicity of radishes in a watering can. And a bit more complex, very colorful composition. You can again see that I spritzed it with the water. And oh, how I love pumpkins. And we found that old grinder at a flea market. And this old piece of weathered wood we bought at a junk shop. You may see it in a few more images. I'll use it a lot. Nature provides such variety of shape and patterns and wonder. And in the environment of still life, we can control the placement of objects, the background and the lighting. We are in control of everything, which can be a blessing or it can be a curse. So these were taken at a flower photography workshop where I learned how to position flowers and make them stay in place. And I started studying still lifes, both paintings and photographs, so I could practice composition and lighting. Because after seeing many beautiful paintings of simple still life subjects online, I was inspired to create a simple composition of just onions and burlap. And this is just natural light. And I thought I would try to compose my own bouquet of sunflowers in the style of Van Gogh. So here's my version on the right. I found this 5-sided vase my daughter made in middle school ceramics class, filled it with sunflowers from my garden, put them on a yellow tablecloth, and added a painterly texture in post-processing. So what did I learn? Well, I learned not to do that again. Who knew that the vase my daughter made in middle school ceramics class did not have a glaze on the bottom? The water soaked through, and I now have this pentagonal stain as a permanent reminder of my still life project. Thanks, Anita. So a few thoughts on composition. We're going to touch on shape and color, placement of objects, triangles, odd numbers, angle of view is important, and something called flat lay style. So shape and color. Practicing still life photography, it makes you really think about composition, including the arrangement of the objects and colors and the path followed by the movement of the viewer's eye. So I think you're all aware that, your eye tends to go to red. And here I found these 2 pairs with red on one side. Here's more red. So I intentionally placed them apart from one another so your eye would kind of bounce back and forth. And then I positioned these stems and this leaf with the idea that your eye kind of goes up and comes around, maybe back up again. And so there's movement in the image. And I love diagonal lines. I use diagonals in a lot of my images. Here's a very muted color palette, a composition full of lines and angles. And this was taken at Ellis Island, a fascinating place to photograph if you ever get the opportunity. Negative space tends to create a calmer mood in your still life images. So while it can be fun to embellish your still life compositions with lots of interesting elements, remember that less is often more. And here you can see how the subject falls in that traditional rule of thirds. And still lifes can be simple, but even a lone subject will benefit with good composition. You will often see triangle shapes in still lifes. So this one's a bit more complex, but it still has a triangular composition. And angle of view is important. So here I kept adjusting my camera on my tripod just up and down a little bit because I wanted to get a little bit of definition inside this picture. If my camera was a little bit lower, I would have not seen the backside of this. And I wanted to see inside the sugar bowl and inside this picture. And I don't know if anyone has really figured out why odd numbers are more pleasing. I've read that it suggests a visual balance. It seems to me that it would be more of an unbalance, but I agree that it works. And 3s and 5s seem to work best, but it can be more. Someone needs to mute. Okay, so I think I am done surfing Google Images and Pinterest boards when I stumble upon something called flat lay composition. I am not done. Now I'm intrigued and I need to see more. So there goes another 2 hours on the computer, thanks to Anita. But basically for flat lay, you put the lens of your camera parallel to your subject and shoot straight down for a more contemporary look. And it does help if you have a tripod with the arm that comes straight out and your camera points straight down. But I took this image before I even knew what a flat lay was. And I just want to mention, I've got the Berks Photo Society to thank. When I began my photographic journey about 10 years ago, I knew nothing about photography. And I stumbled on some images by a macro photographer named Mike Motes. And I was blown away by the images. I was just mesmerized with them. His images were just magic. And then I saw he was going to be a presenter at a weekend photo seminar, a whole weekend event hosted by your club back in 2013. So these are early images of mine taken at that conference workshop. I took his workshop, bought his book and an ebook on a CD, went back to my dorm room at Kutztown College. I don't know if any of you were at this same conference, and stayed up into the early morning hours going through the entire CD and reading the book. So that event had a huge impact. All the speakers were great, but spending some time with my online photographic idol it actually energized and motivated me to really delve into photography. I left that Berks Photo Conference with a newfound passion. So thank you, Berks Photo Society. And one of the things Mike Moats taught us was to shoot straight down on your subject. It not only creates a pleasing composition, but it helps with getting everything in focus when it is at the same level to your camera lens. But I don't recall Mike Moats ever calling it flat lay. I don't think he did. And moving on to some more recent images of mine in the same style, I honestly didn't know that flat lay was a thing, but it's easy to do. It's easy to showcase items you already own. It can be shot almost anywhere. It can be as simple as arranging items on your desk. So for this one, I searched in the back of a closet, pulled out old boxes of silver once used by my grandmothers, odd numbers, 9. And when I placed the food items on the spoons, a few of these little things spilled out, and I left them there. I felt it added some visual interest, some character. Now, all of these images were taken by me, but some were totally inspired by images I found online. When I saw something I liked, I tried my best to create something similar so I could learn. Because frankly, it never would have occurred to me to photograph silverware in the bottom of a sink, but I like it. So I created all these setups. I pulled food out of the fridge, utensils out of every drawer. I had stuff all over the kitchen. Jim went to make dinner, couldn't find any utensils to cook with, and we ran out of forks and spoons before dinner. So I thought my research would end with some great examples of beautiful bowls filled with pears and grapes, maybe a skull or two, but that was just the beginning. My quest to learn more went way beyond skimming a few library books. I wound up filling many mornings and many cups of coffee as I began to realize how diverse still lifes could be. So the laundry didn't get done. Thanks, Anita. So now I'm on some sort of a silverware kick. I'm photographing forks in all different positions. So the shadows remind me of the long curved necks of herons. Another one inspired by an image I found online, a simple setup on a piece of black plexiglass to create the reflection. I learned that it is not easy balancing an egg on forks and that it makes quite a mess when it rolls off and breaks.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Daddy. How are you? Good. How are you?
Can everybody mute, please?
Yeah, you can do that mute control.
Where's the mute control at?
If you go to participants, you'll see the list and then you can mute who's open.
Okay, thank you. Gotcha. Sorry about that. Gosh.
Betsy is muted now.
There, I unmuted myself.
Okay. Thanks,
Thanks,
Betsy.
Bob. Okay, thanks. So I learned it's not easy balancing an egg on forks and that it makes quite a mess when it rolls off and breaks. And I learned another tip online. See this tiny little notch at the top? If you take a pin and make a little hole in the top of the egg and in the bottom of the egg, you can blow the yolk out. And an empty egg is much easier to balance, and it doesn't make as big a mess when it falls. And I swear, sometimes I think magic just happens. Here I was just playing around with different groupings and positions of silverware, and the light from a window just came in and it reflected off these forks. Uh-oh, I didn't move forward. Hold on. There it is. Let me make sure it's okay. Now it's proceeding. So anyway, magic just happens. This just happened. The light just reflected off these forks, and I felt like it was a heavenly chorus singing. Now the shadows are subdued, and it's more about this angelic glow. Isn't this beautiful? Kitchen forks become menacing monsters in the right light and angle. I mean, look at how this changes from a soft angel-like form on the left to a devil's pitchfork on the right. So I look at this and I feel like angel on the left shoulder and devil on the right. Good conscience, bad conscience. Should I have a cup of herbal tea or another glass of wine? Right shoulder won. So now I'm on to photographing wine and wine glasses. In this one, I'm playing with the shadows cast by bottles. And this is another example of flat light composition, by the way, as I am shooting straight down on the tops of these wine bottles. A found still life, wine glasses in a restaurant. Created still lifes. I set these up at home and experimented with the arrangements, the lighting, the angle, and experimented with some dramatic lighting to highlight those beautiful curves. Again, my husband, Jim, is my lighting expert. I have yet to conquer flash photography, but he's pretty good at it. And a created still life. I started playing with reflections and refractions. So by changing the camera angle ever so slightly, the shape of those refracted polka dots would change. Just an ordinary glass in front of striped paper. I Googled stripes and printed it. So we've been in the same house for 30 years. I'm amazed at the amount of stuff that we have accumulated. I'm sure some of you can relate to this. So we had these old dishes, not even enough of a set to take to Goodwill. So I was going to throw them out. Jim said, why don't you photograph them first? So I did. And then he said, if they're just going in the trash, why not break them and photograph them first? So I did. I challenged myself to create an interesting composition and lighting. Anything can be your subject, even broken dishes. So maybe I got a little carried away. And as I went deeper and deeper into the Google still life wormhole, I came across the technique of scanning. Now, this was already a favorite technique of mine, and I have done quite a bit of it. Sometimes the technique is called scanography. The camera is a flatbed scanner. This is just an ordinary scanner we bought to scan documents. It's a Canon CanoScan. I think it cost maybe 120 bucks. And here's how it works. This image shows some tomatoes and onions. I want you to notice how they're placed. The big onion is bottom left and top right. This is the resulting image. Notice now that the onions are now on the bottom right and top left because everything is upside down and backwards. The camera or the scanner is shooting from below. And this is actually another example of a flat light composition, although again, it was shot upside down. Cropped in tighter, you can achieve incredible detail using a scanner. So some more with the scanner. This is Queen Anne's lace, just positioned in a graceful dance. Notice again, sort of a triangular composition. And these seed pods had really beautiful colors. We used to call them helicopters when I was a kid. If you pull them off the stem and toss them in the air, they kind of whirligig down. And autumn leaves work quite well. I mean, there's so many choices of shape and size and color. And every autumn I go on a walk and I come home with my pockets stuffed with leaves. Because I enjoy trying different groupings and patterns of leaves. And here cropped in a portion of a scan of a colorful autumn leaf. So again, you can see the amazing detail. And this makes me think that I'm in an airplane. I'm flying over highways and roads and housing developments. And oh, look, there's Target. There's Wawa.
Betsy, are you covering up the items when you're scanning them, like in a box to cover them or not?
No. The top of the scanner is completely open and the light falls off so quickly that it only lights up your subject for a ½ inch to an inch. And then the rest just disappears into darkness. So I don't have a bright light right over it, but I do it in a room with the lights on.
Okay.
Some Hellebore flowers, odd numbers. Spring flowers from my garden, more Hellebore flowers. And I love Jack in the Pulpits. a tapestry of flowers and vegetables. Now, it is tricky and time consuming to create a composition like this, because everything is upside down and backwards, but also you get a little surprises that you don't intend. So for example, what happens here, I'll lay everything down and take a scan, and sure enough, there might be a leaf or say a stem going across the sunflower. Well, the only way to fix that is I've got to first pick up the tomato, pick up the broccoli, pick up the Queen Anne's lace to get to the sunflower, gently pick it up, remove that stem, and try to gently put everything down again. So you do have to be patient. It might take me 10 to 20 attempts at repositioning to get an image that I like. So here's a pattern of pansies, and not quite perfect. As you can see in this one leaf was kind of bent over. A pansy petal was bent. Doesn't really bother me, it's okay. But that's what you deal with the scanner, because you can't see it when you're putting them down there. So this is what an arrangement looks like as I'm trying to create my still life as it's placed on the scanner. And it looks like quite a mess, doesn't it? Here is the scan from that mess. So I want you to notice here's a big mayapple flower and a smaller mayapple flower. Here it is, the big mayapple flower, the smaller mayapple flower. I've covered it with a sprig of azalea. Here's that sprig of azalea. So hopefully you get an idea of what's going on here. So my process is first I gather all sorts of items from my yard. The bottle of Windex is there, as you need to constantly clean the scanner glass. And then I place the items onto the scanner into what I think will be an interesting arrangement. You can see on the monitor that I've actually scanned just some parts of flowers that I may use later. And this was my first attempt, and I hated it. I felt the colors just didn't work, especially the colors of those helicopter seeds down at the bottom. Those colors just didn't play well with the colors of the flowers. So I just wiped everything off the scanner and started over. And I decided to stick with blues and purples and greens. And I like these colors much better. I think this composition looks a bit squashed. I want to elongate it a bit. Okay, now I'm liking this better. And just some minor embellishments. Up in the top, you'll see I'm going to go back and forth here. I just added a couple little pieces in Photoshop. And then I tied it together with a border. But you can simulate the magic of milkweed seed pods floating away. And I don't know how you could get a shot like this in nature without background clutter and to get those other seeds right where you want them. A couple more of milkweed, which I find difficult to photograph. But if you can get it, it can be quite delicate and graceful. But do you have any idea what a mess milkweed seeds make? I'm still finding these fuzzies flying around my house. Thanks, Anita. So I will take a pause here to see if there are any questions or comments.
Wait, let me, there we go. I'm trying to unmute everybody.
Oh, okay. And Jay, I will tell you at this point, I inevitably get the question about, is the lid open on the scanner and is it done in a dark room? So I do have to touch up the darkness of the background a little bit, but I do it with the lid wide open, lights on or in daylight. Again, as long as there's not a bright light shining right above the scanner, that light falls off so quickly. But you do have to pick a subject also. It can't be something too big because it only scans for, maybe half an inch. It starts to fade off very quickly.
You may have mentioned this, maybe I missed it. How do you avoid the crushing or the flattening of the leaves? Just a lot of experimentation and propping things up. Like leaves getting crushed or flower petals getting smushed.
Well, again, because I don't close the lid, I'm not
What's that?
squishing anything, okay? I'm just placing them down. However, if you have like those pansies, it's easy for a petal to go under. And sometimes I'll take like a toothpick, I'll do a scan and I'll see, oh, that petal's bent. So you either have to kind of gently lift everything up and try to gently put it down again, or sometimes I'll take like a little toothpick and try to see if I can just nudge that edge of that petal out. It can be frustrating. You have to have some patience on that one. But the quality of the images is great because you can scan very, very high DPI. It's really quite incredible. Okay, any other questions or comments?
Betsy, how much processing do you do in Photoshop? You mentioned Photoshop.
Well, it depends on which image, of course.
The scanner ones is what I'm interested
All
in.
right, the scanner ones, I do quite a bit in Photoshop because the black background doesn't get fully black, and I like to have a completely black background. So some of the ones where the flowers pretty much cover up everything, I don't have to do much at all. Sometimes I might add a little detail and topaz, or I might make some color adjustments or something like that.
Mhm.
But some of the other arrangements where there's a lot of black showing, I will go in and work it to try to darken that background. And then sometimes too, something won't be positioned quite right. And in Photoshop, I might move something a little bit.
Mhm. I saw Bill's going to go out and buy a scanner. They're all over Craigslist, Bill. Everybody's trying to get rid of them. They don't know how to use them.
That's
Well,
using the new Lightroom masking tool for subject makes creating a black background very, very easy.
Yes. Yeah, and maybe you know the answer to this. What I wish is that I could take that mask in Lightroom and then pull that subject already masked into Photoshop. And I don't think you can do that, can you? I didn't think so.
No, you cannot.
Because that
Not
select
yet.
subject works very well in Lightroom. It doesn't work as well in Photoshop,
Hmm.
which I don't understand, but hopefully it will at some point.
That's a future upgrade, probably.
Yeah. Yes, but if you're doing all your processing in Lightroom, Vince, that's a very good point. You could just do select subject and do it right there. And boy, with the scanning, it would recognize those edges and it would see your subject probably just about every time. So good point.
But
Okay.
somebody asked if that was a specialized scanner. I don't think it is it?
No, it's just, we bought it to scan like ordinary documents. It's like $100 scanner. It's, home
Now,
office thing.
Are you scanning at like 300 DPI?
Yes, I do scan at 300 DPI, sometimes 600 DPI. And you can actually scan like 2400 DPI, but the file is so huge, it takes forever to save. So I'm typically at like either 300 or 600 DPI.
And you scan to a JPEG then?
That's what I was
Yes,
asking.
yes, I believe it is a JPEG. It's either JPEG or TIFF, but I believe it's JPEG. If Jim is on, he may be able to answer that. He's my technical advisor, but I'm pretty sure it's JPEG. So any other questions?
It's a TIFF, Betsy.
Oh, all right, there's my technical advisor from downstairs. It's a TIFF.
It's a
Thanks,
TIFF.
Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, I'll continue. Let's move on to lighting because lighting is so important and it can have a tremendous impact on your images. Here's a simple still life. This is at the Mercer Museum in Doylestown. But the lighting is what makes this come alive. There was warm light inside the building and cool light from the window that provided definition of the subject, and I think a pleasing color palette of warm golds and cool blues. Here's an old car jack we bought at a flea market, and it is greasy. The image on the left is the available light in my kitchen. The image on the right is the exact same. Nothing's been moved. I just placed a black background behind it, took some colored cellophane, wrapped it around 2 flashlights, and lit it from the sides. So quite a dramatic difference. Cute little gummy bears. Now, I don't want to run into them in a dark alley. So have you ever seen such scary gummy bears? Oh, and you thought I was done with the forks, right? Well, lighting can take an ordinary object and give it personality. Creative lighting allows the photographer the ability to turn everyday objects into beautiful photographs. Hold on one moment. I got to get the dog out of the door here. She managed to barge her way into the door. So here's a more traditional still life. I collected a variety of vases, but kept to a color scheme of greens and blues. We found this interesting martini glass at Goodwill, but the lighting is doing nothing for this image. When I creatively control the light, it creates depth and drama. And I added a little fish in that martini glass just for fun. That was in Photoshop, Bob. So here, I like the subtle, gentle light in this image. This is natural light. But by changing the lighting, the mood and look of the image is completely different. And you may like the first one better or this one, doesn't matter. I like them both. And just a side note on this one, I've got a little compositional boo-boo in this image. So see this stem right here? It merges with the pear, merges or touches, and it's not really that big a deal. It doesn't really bother me that much, but had I noticed that in advance, I would have just tilted this pear up slightly, just to give a little breathing room between this and this, just similar to what you see over here. So attention to detail. Now back to lighting again. You can even creatively control sunlight in your images. So I took this is at that Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia. I lined up an opening in the cross so that the sun shone through, and it created this beautiful sunburst. Can I add some drama by changing the lighting? Well, this lighting is quite flat. Now I've added some rim light to give the edges some definition, and I put a candle inside the jack-o'-lantern. Now that's a Halloween pumpkin. And okay, so this is a still life I am particularly proud of. I created it at a workshop by the master of painting with light, Harold Ross. Most of you are probably familiar with his work. And I've watched him demonstrate. Some of the images I have already shown were based on his method of light painting, but not to this level. This is what I wanted to learn. I mean, look at the sculptural feel to this image. The light is pure magic. You can feel the coarseness of that leather strap on the bottom, the smoothness of the fabric. So this was a big undertaking. It was an investment of money and 3 days to learn, which is complicated. But Harold is an excellent teacher, and I'm really glad I did this. I certainly have a much better understanding of light and composition. So 3 days, and I came away with one image. This was it. But I want to point out what the magic of light can do. You see that leather strap? This is the same image, just enlarged. This leather strap appears to have this little curve right here, a gentle curve. In reality, it's completely flat. The curve is simulated by adding light here and shadow here. Isn't that cool? Something else Harold Ross taught me. So I'll give a quick overview of the process. I'm sure some of you have probably tried this since Harold's not that far away. And actually I saw him at one of the Berks Weekend workshops too. But again, that was sort of a Cliff Notes version. And I'm going to give you a Cliff Notes version here. There really is a lot more to it, but just so you get the idea if you're not familiar. So I set up a still life of vegetables from our community garden. This is just a single light source. I'm just trying to get everything positioned in a pleasing composition, rather flat, boring light. And then I use a small flashlight with a curved PVC pipe taped to bend the light and soften it. Turn out all the lights and then begin light painting. I'm lighting one area at a time. I'm moving around the subject and I'm doing different images. I'm painting small areas with the flashlight, going to the top, around the sides, the bottom. And then all the images are pulled into Photoshop in layers and blended together. So here's the finished light painting version. So yes, this is a bit complicated, but consider the difference. Here's the regular one source light from this to this. So I'll share a few more images done with the same technique. I was inspired by an image I saw online for this one, and it wasn't easy getting this stack of eggshells to stand up. I put a little blob of rubber cement right there to hold it up. And I like this shot, but the glue didn't hold for long. They toppled over. And this was a happy accident, as I actually like this one even more. So light painting creates a very dramatic sculptural feel.
Betsy, we have a question. Are
Sure.
you using any photo stacking at all?
Not in these images right here. I do use photo stacking. Early on, I had one image when I said I'm sitting outside, and there was an image with dew on I think a flower, and that was photo stacked. So I do use photo stacking. I don't have too much in this presentation that's photo stacked. Most of it is not.
I think the question was for that image where you did the light painting of different parts and then put them together in layers. Somebody
Okay.
wondered how many layers that was.
Oh, okay. That is probably about 20 layers. And that's not photo. When you say photo stacking, I'm thinking of maybe I misunderstood the question. I'm talking about focus stacking, and you talked about photo stacking. Yes, those were stacked in Photoshop. That was probably about 20 images. The one I did with Harold Ross was probably more like 50 images because he's so meticulous. Some of these, like these eggshells you're looking at right here, this was probably about 8 images, I would estimate. And then, yes, you just bring them all in. I bring them on all together in layers, just Photoshop in layers, bring them all in together. And then I just hit lighten blend mode. And then I'll have to go back in and do a lot of different adjustments on them. I'll lighten some things, darken some things, mask some things. But yeah, there is photo stacking. So here are more onions with burlap. Again, this technique just really enhances textures. And working in the newspaper industry, I had access to old wooden printers, letters, and numbers. So I created this still life. A traditional setup. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, we're starting to collect quite an assortment of junk to photograph that we have picked up at garage sales and thrift stores. And here's that old board again. We found these clock gears at an antique market, and I knew I had to bring it home to light paint. And this one of a bunch of old rusty tools, some antique printer letters again. And you can tell I really enjoy the magic of light painting. And a close-up of just some of the wrenches. And because the light is directional, it's coming from the side, it really emphasizes the texture.
Where do you set up your studio?
In the room I'm sitting in right now, this is a small library, and I do most of them here. Not this one, but most of the others. I've got one window in this room, and I just close the curtains to get it dark enough. And I do it in the daytime too, but I've got light blocking curtains. So you do need to do it in a fairly dark room. So I do them most. You can really do it in any room as long as you can make it fairly dark. So this one was done elsewhere. This was actually done where we print our newspapers. And this one's brand new. You're the first ones to see it, as I just shot this on New Year's Day. And I brought the layers together in Photoshop yesterday. So this is an antique Ben Franklin press that was used to print the first edition of one of the newspapers that I worked for, called the Hatboro Public Spirit. The first edition was printed on this press in 1873. Pretty cool. Inspiration. So where does inspiration come from? Well, it comes from presentations and workshops. Again, I was very much inspired early on by Mike Moats. Since then, I've been inspired by many other very talented photographers. And a lot of inspiration comes from my research. Sometimes ideas just come to me. Jim has a small collection of old cameras, and I wanted to create an image that would acknowledge their importance to us as photographers. This was done on that black plexiglass. And in this case, I wanted to memorialize an old friend, RIP to my Canon 40D. It lived a long and active life. It had an expected shutter life of 100,000 cycles, and I think I probably doubled that. Inspiration comes from Camera Club challenges. The Chester County Camera Club has an annual summer challenge. They'll give out a list of topics to photograph during the summer months when we don't meet, and there will be a theme. Like this one a few years back was From Where I Stand. Your feet had to be in every image. So it's sort of like a scavenger hunt of topics to photograph. And this one had to have your feet in it, but it had to be with a book. So it really makes you think and forces you to be creative. Here's another one from the Where I Stand series. The assignment was in the bathroom. Here the assignment was messy. And I'm not sure this qualifies as a still life. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's my presentation, so I say it does. I got my dog Shadow to sit still. That was quite an accomplishment. And here's how I did this one. Set up a tablecloth on a picnic table, hung a backdrop from the swing set behind it. This took a couple of assistants. That's my husband, Jim, our daughter, Alex, and a lot of flour and a lot of tries to get Shadow to sit still with the spoon in her mouth without much success. She was not cooperating. And then Jim solved the problem. He said, put a little bit of peanut butter right there on that wooden spoon, and that did the trick. So this is the shot I use of Shadow. Then I just asked Jim to toss some flour around because I knew I would add it to the final image. Removed Jim's hand, added the final flying flower, finished image. Shadow the chef being a bit messy. And here she is again. This was to illustrate the word elegant. And oh, there are those Goodwill martini glasses. This time they're filled with doggy biscuits. So inspiration comes from local day trips. Here's one from Hopewell Furnace National Park, a place that I'm sure you've all been to. And inside old historical places, there are always some treats to photograph. Probably some of you have this same shot. Another from Hopewell. I liked the textures of the rusty bucket and the old brick wall. And a few from Valley Forge National Park, which is near where I live, so I go there a lot. And we tend to think of places like Valley Forge or Hopewell for beautiful landscapes and structures, but there are found still lifes throughout. In Valley Forge, the bluebells in spring, many other flowering trees and plants. This thistle was in a field cluttered with other vegetation, very distracting background. So I was wearing a black jacket. I took it off and just asked a photo buddy, said, Wayne, just hold this jacket behind this plant for me for a minute, just so I could separate it from the background. Autumn is also beautiful. And I like to just sit on the ground. And that's when I discovered gems like these. So I often wear rain pants and I have knee pads so I can kneel down or just lay in the grass. Because otherwise you would just walk on this. You would never see it. So just stop, take your time and observe. Here are some autumn leaves reflected in a broken glass of an old barn window. And in Valley Forge, there is a special solitude in winter. It's just really beautiful when it snows there. And a minimalist approach can be quite beautiful. We talked before about negative space or less is more. And I love to look for patterns and textures in ice, and Valley Forge has the river there and all the leaves. And I love looking for shots like this. And a shout out to Jenny Lodge. I don't know if she's on, but I love her shot that's on the website, an exquisite composition of a leaf and ice that was one of the best of year images in your competition. It's really nice. And nature just provides endless still lifes that are works of art. And now we're no longer in Valley Forge. We're at home. This is just some frost on a drafty window in my home. I think we need to replace our windows. It's a macro image of frost. and the crystals on a frozen soap bubble. This is really hard to do. It has to be really cold, like under 18 degrees and no wind, or your bubbles will pop before you get the shot. And I said that inspiration sometimes like just comes to me. And I actually think that my passion for photography has a lot to do with that, is I am much more aware of looking at things and finding beauty in unusual places. So last winter, all these icicles formed overnight. This is our sunroom in our house. And overnight, these icicles just formed. And I looked at them, and then I looked closer. And then I grabbed the macro lens because this is what I saw. And the closer I got, the more fascinated I was with these just amazing patterns in the ice. And I was able to frame this one in front of an out of focus water droplet behind it. So when the ice comes this year, don't swear at it, photograph it. Inspiration comes from other found still lifes. Here's interesting patterns in the gears of old farm equipment. Or a created still life inside a wooden canoe. Jim builds and restores these beautiful old canoes, and he enjoys his beer. The clock at the Mercer Museum, just full of still life opportunities there. And these aren't still lifes, of course. These are shots that one would normally think of taking at the World War II reenactment at the Mid-Atlantic Air Museum. I'm sure most of you have been there. And it's a fantastic photo opportunity, especially for those of you like me who are a bit intimidated to ask permission to take a photo. You don't need to ask permission at a reenactment. The participants love having their picture taken. But look for the still life opportunities because they are everywhere. I got a kick out of this. Inside this typewriter is the morning report. And we're lucky to live near Longwood Gardens, obviously one of the largest gardens in the world. And this is from the annual Orchid Extravaganza. And I enjoy looking for unique compositions by zooming in close to subjects. These are both from the Tulip Festival at Longwood. And okay, so every year we see images pop up on social media of the annual show of the Himalayan blue poppies at Longwood Gardens. I'm sure some of you have seen this because they only last a few weeks and apparently they're quite rare. Well, I had avoided photographing them as I had always heard that there were hordes of photographers all trying to shoot the same thing. But I finally went and I was pleased. I actually had these beauties to myself. And I was pretty happy with these images. So I posted some on Facebook and said, I can finally cross this one off my bucket list. Well, I immediately started getting comments. Nice pictures, Betsy, but they are not the Himalayan blue poppies. They are some kind of anemone. Oops. No wonder I had them to myself. I was in the wrong place in Longwood Gardens. So I went back a few days later and found the real Himalayan blue poppies. And a hint, if you go a day or two after Longwood says the exhibit is over, they may still be there, but the hordes of photographers are not. But after all the hoopla about Himalayan blue poppies, I think I like the purple anemones better anyway. I'm not sure a live fly counts as a still life, but she did stay still for me. Inspiration comes from photo tours and workshops. And I'd like to give a shout out to Richard Lewis, your October judge, who I believe recommended me as a presenter. And Jim and I attended his workshop to the airplane and automotive graveyard in the Jersey Pine Barrens. And it was fantastic. What a cool place to photograph. And we were happy to be able to meet and spend some time with Richard Lewis. He's a really great guy. Now, remember, we talked about still lifes are found or created or something in between. Well, that's my glove, carefully placed. Where else? The glove compartment. And this airplane and truck graveyard, it's just a cornucopia of still lifes, especially if you're interested in celebrating the beauty of rust and decay. There's a lot of it.
Where is that graveyard?
It's in the Pine Barrens. It's in South Jersey. And I don't know that it has public access. I don't believe it does. So, I'm sorry, does it?
It does
Someone-
not, only through his
Workshops?
workshop.
Okay. So yeah, we signed up for his workshop, and of course he's there to advise you if you want advice. And he gave us a little tour of the place. It's a pretty crazy place, and you have to sign waivers because there is a lot of twisted metal and things you could hurt yourself on. But really cool place to photograph. And we went in November, and I'd recommend the fall because the autumn leaves just present sort of a natural harmony to the grit of twisted metal and rust. I just love the juxtaposition of the natural leaves and all the rust and decay. Great place. So get creative. Sometimes I get an idea and it's fun trying to figure out how to create the image that's in my imagination. Here, I loved these spring crocuses and snowdrops, but they were drooping over in my yard. They're surrounded by leaves and debris. I thought, how can I get them to stand up and have a background that will emphasize their lines and form? Thumbtacks in a pool noodle. Problem solved. Take some ordinary objects. Try to photograph them in a different way. With some imagination, you can create a toolbox skyline or a broccoli and sunflower sunrise. Try some dramatic lighting, and maybe add a subtle reflection. For this one, I placed a bright flashlight inside the basket to get the appearance of daylight pouring through the basket. And whenever possible, look for character, something that can add emotion or a connection. Look at the protective embrace in this image, a simple subject and a simple color palette, but I feel a human connection in this image. And here I carefully arranged some dandelions to form a family. Group hug. And I found this oak leaf clinging to a fern, looking as if it is hanging on for dear life. That leaf was actually growing up that fern just like that. I did not take it off. I did then create the rest of the composition with other ferns. Or character in an unusual juxtaposition. I found this autumn leaf nestled inside a manhole cover. It's only a still life until the next truck drove by and swept it up with its exhaust. And sometimes you can find a bit of humor. I think this sunflower has a secret. I think this one's giving an obscene gesture. So a few pointers. Keep it simple. Create a pleasing composition, so important. Choose your perspective, vary your angle, get low, put on your rain pants, get down on the grass, just move around. Find a suitable background, hang a black blanket behind something, ask a friend to hold up your black jacket. Control your lighting. Slow down, take your time, pay attention to detail, make minor adjustments again and again, move that pear just a little bit. And we really didn't talk much about post-processing creativity, but most of these images have been adjusted somewhat and enhanced with some post-processing. So, and just a footnote, these three images all have something in common, something unintentional. It's pretty obvious right here in this broken ornament. That's the ceiling fan. And you can see it here in this marble. And it's pretty subtle over here, but there it is in that egg. And ironically, I didn't notice that ceiling fan in any of these images when I took the shot. It was only later when I looked at them on the monitor of my computer that I noticed them. And they don't really bother me that much. I think it's okay. But again, it just points out you just really need to observe and take your time. So anyway, in the quest for more and more items to photograph, I have collected slinkies, a meat grinder, a greasy car jack, a mannequin head, a deer skull, old tools and clock gears and thingamajigs and birds' nests and dead bugs and even a wooden snake. So while everyone else is tidying up with Marie Kondo and donating their junk to thrift stores, I am out at garage sales and Goodwill shops buying up all their trash. Thanks, Anita. So, does anyone want to know why we no longer invite guests to the Wilson house? I swear Jim's canoes are in there somewhere. So it all started with a request from Anita. And they say it's not the destination, it's the journey. Well, my destination is this presentation to you. My journey has been priceless. And for that, I say, thank you, Anita. And I'd like to say thank you to all of you. Thank you. So I have my website up there and my email. So I'm certainly open to more questions or comments. But if you want to jot my email down, if there's anything that you think of after tonight that you want to shoot me an email, please feel free to do so. So this has been fun. And Jay, are there any questions or comments?
I don't see any questions in the chat. You guys can just speak out. If anybody has any questions, feel free to share your questions.
Betsy, this is Vince. I do have a question.
Sure.
In your Photoshop layer composite, when you used lighten mode on blend, do you have a set figure for your, when you're doing your 20 or 30 layers, do you set your opacity to a gradation, or is it very variable depending on each layer, or is it they're all 30%? Is there a rule of thumb?
Sometimes it depends on the composite that I'm doing, but typically when I first bring those layers in, the opacity is at 100% on all the layers.
Right.
Now, because it's on lighten mode, it's only going to, it doesn't keep compounding that light. If the light's already there, it won't make it any brighter unless the next image adds more light in it, sort of a different area. So, but then once I have all those layers in, what I'll do is I'll hide all of the layers, turn the little eyeball off on all the layers, and then I open them one layer at a time. And then I will either adjust the opacity, or more frequently, I will add a mask. And I'll just mask out certain areas. If you take the workshop with Harold Ross, he's very, very meticulous. And his methodology is a lot more exacting and a better way to do it than I do. By me bringing all the layers in at once and just hitting that lighten mode, it's sort of he would not advise doing it that way. But I find it much easier, and I don't have as much patience as he does.
Thank you.
Hey,
I
Betsy,
put, by the way, the two photographers that you did mention, Dross and Moats, I put their websites in the chat for folks.
Oh, that's great.
I have a
What
question.
kind of-
Sure.
Go ahead.
Hi. On the flower images, the purple anemone and the Himalayan blue poppies and then the fern, did you do that on the scanner? That solid black?
The Himalayan blue poppies and the purple anemones were not done on the scanner because they're done at Longwood Gardens. And
Okay.
I don't think Longwood would appreciate me bringing a scanner in.
Yeah. No scanners allowed.
What was the other one you asked about?
The fern and the was a leaf, some kind of oak leaf with the ferns.
Okay, the
Fiddle
fern
fern.
with the oak leaf, that was done on the scanner.
Okay.
So I found the oak leaf growing up outside on that fern, and I cut the fern off, and I cut some other ferns off and brought them all in, and then I created that still life. I
That
created
looks like,
the
that
position.
scanner looks like a lot of fun to me.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would encourage you to try it now.
Well, my printer's broken, but I might be able to bring it up from the basement and just use it for scanning.
Hey, yeah, you gotta try.
Mhm. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Hey Betsy, what kind of are you using a tripod most of the time? That's one question. And the other question is, what lens or lenses? Are you primarily using one macro lens or are you using a combination of lenses?
Well, the easy answer is it depends. There are a whole variety of techniques were used in this presentation. For the question about the tripod, when I'm doing that light painting and you're lighting different areas of a subject, always use a tripod. You must use a tripod. You don't want anything to move. The ones at like the flowers at Longwood, certainly where I did not use a tripod. Most of the setup still lifes that I do, like the onions and burlap and some things like that, I do use a tripod. Some of the things like the silverware, I used a tripod for most of those. Most of the flowers that you saw were either done handheld if they were done outside or at Longwood. And if it's on the scanner, you don't need a tripod because they stay still on the scanner. Now, as far as lenses, there was a variety of lenses used there. When I do the light painting, I'll always use a prime lens because I'm looking for, to get the focus as sharp as I can. And it depends how far away I am from my subject, but I'll usually use maybe a 35 or a 50. For some of the other flowers that you saw, I have used a close-up lens or a macro lens. The purple anemones were a macro lens, and that was focus stacked. I referred to that, even though I wasn't answering the question someone asked, but some of those close-up of the flowers I did with focus stacking. So it was handheld, but I bracketed and took a lot of images and then brought them in Photoshop, and Photoshop just picked all the parts that were in focus. So
Okay.
the answer to that question is a big variety of lenses and techniques.
Betsy, you said focus stacking. Is that on your Sony? Is it an automatic setting?
No, I do not have focus stacking on the Sony.
Okay, because I know some do.
Yeah, I use the
so-
Photoshop focus stacking. I've tried that Helicon focus stacking, and I need to do a tutorial or something. I guess I don't really know how to do it, but the Photoshop focus stacking works quite well. It's pretty easy.
So you're handheld, but you're manually focusing into the subject?
Yes, what I'll do, I'll be very close to, or as close as I can to like that anemone, and then I'll focus on it. And then typically, because it's handheld, I'm just kind of going, I'm just moving
Oh, okay.
slightly in and out. And as I move, the plane of focus moves. And I
Okay.
take a lot of shots so that hopefully when I get back, and I may stack, 30 images, hoping that I got every slice in focus.
I do that by accident, but I'm focusing on the wrong spot usually. I should just take more images. Okay.
Yeah, just kind of move back and forth and eventually you'll get it.
Betsy, someone asked in the chat, and I was wondering this too. For your backgrounds, are you using different backdrops, or do you ever add a background in Photoshop after the fact?
It depends. The answer is
thought
both.
so.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
answer is both. So this image that's on the screen right now, that's a big gray photographer's backdrop. And for the light painting images, I almost always use a black blanket. It's a black fleece blanket that sort of absorbs the light. But then even in some of the light painting images, after I'm done, Harold Ross taught me this, you take away that black backdrop, and then while your still life is still there, so if you can wrap your head around this one, now it's on a white wall behind it. Then you light the wall, it's still in a dark room, you light the wall behind your still life. So then you get a silhouette of your still life, okay? And the reason you do that, now you've got a white background surrounding your black still life. Now you have a mask that you can put any texture you want on. So your question was, do I add a background or add a texture? Yes, sometimes I do.
Oh, that's a cool idea. Thank you.
That's great. So
And
Betsy, may I
Betsy,
ask what kind of camera you're using?
Most of the time I use a Sony A6000.
Mhm.
And some of the light painting that I do is on a Canon 7D.
Thank you.
That's 6,000.
Betsy, that white wall thing with the silhouette would again be perfect for the Lightroom subject mask. If you could take the mask out to then put your new background in.
Yes, you're right, it would.
Yeah.
I just wish, let's hope that Lightroom comes up with a way to take that mask and put it into Photoshop. I
So
would
you
love
don't-
that.
You don't think the Photoshop select object works as well as the new Lightroom one?
I personally have not been able to make it work for me. Maybe what I need to do is do a tutorial on it or something like that. I don't know. Have any of you found it to work?
No, I haven't found that to work as well. And I've heard speakers say the same thing, who, the quote experts.
Yeah,
Because it's a brand new AI tool, so it just has had more attention from Adobe. And I assume they'll upgrade Photoshop.
yeah. I hope so, or make Lightroom play with Photoshop a little bit easier.
Does anyone use the Affinity photo editing?
I
Just
don't know
a-
that one.
Just a free version of it, but I haven't spent much time with it.
Okay, because
Does
I
Bill
have,
here? Bill does. Bill Coughlin. I think he uses
Hey,
Affinity.
Betsy, can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
Thanks.
hey. Okay, so I had Lightroom and I played around with that and Photoshop, and then I bought this MacBook Air, and I have not really put a new photo editing program in, and I'm still getting the feeling I might want to go back to Lightroom. I have some older versions. I just hate the monthly fees. For Photoshop and all.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Once you try the new Lightroom, you won't go back.
Is it a lot
Probably not.
different?
Once you've seen the light.
Is the new Lightroom a lot different than, I started using Camera Raw and I don't know. I didn't know if I should try going back and doing Lightroom again, or I don't know.
There's a
Well, you
lot
may-
of great features in the latest
In the new
version of
Lightroom.
Mhm.
Yeah, maybe I'll try it again.
Each of those features are in the updated Camera Raw, Barbara.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, they're all there. The setup is a little bit different, but all the things you can do in Lightroom, you do in Camera Raw
See, I don't need the
files.
Yeah, the file, and I don't need it. So that's why I kind of stayed away from it and went over to Camera Raw. And I heard all the people talking about Lightroom, and I didn't know if they had gone a lot more past what Camera Raw was or not.
No, they're equal.
So
Cool.
if you're saying that Camera Raw does the same thing as the new Lightroom, couldn't you do that select subject in Camera Raw then, and that would play with Photoshop?
Yes, that's what I want to try.
Yes, but
That's
that's
why I
not
was
called
asking.
Photoshop, right?
What's
Yeah.
that?
That's not direct in Photoshop, however.
Camera Raw, well, once you do something in Camera Raw, then you open it into Photoshop.
Yes,
Correct.
right. Now you're going into Photoshop. So I guess that would be one way to do the mask and get it into Photoshop. That's
Right, right.
Hmm. I'll have to give that a try. I don't use Camera Raw.
Well, Betsy, what you've done in the last 10 years, I think is phenomenal. I really do.
Thanks.
I mean, it's not only you, but it's many photographers. When I see the amazing work that they're doing in a relatively short amount of time, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this person might be retired, or that's all they do, and someone else is doing all the work around the house or something.
Betsy's out picking up items at flea markets and shopping. Somebody's got to do that too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you maintain the inventory?
Oh, gosh. Well, before we started this, I was talking a little bit about workshops. We've done a few workshops for the Chester County Camera Club. So I wound up keeping all of this stuff because when we do like an indoor creativity workshop, we set up all these tables, kind of like Mike Moats does, if you've been to one of his workshops, so that people have items to photograph. So we've kept quite a bit of stuff. We've got a family room that has a few chests of drawers that are basically full of stuff.
Mm. Beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and we have a skeleton in our attic and, you know.
Every now and then you bring it out.
Yep.
And we need to rent a warehouse.
It's not quite that bad, but
I saw that skeleton paddling your canoe once, didn't he?
yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim has named him Uncle Dudley, and we take him
Yep.
over to Marsh Creek every year, and kids, and we tow him, we wire him up into his own canoe, and then we tow him behind another canoe, and we wire a paddle into his hand. So it really, it looks like he's paddling all by himself. It's pretty cool.
He can probably
guess-
still out paddle me though.
I guess they know you at flea markets, farmers markets, barns.
No, we don't go that often.
Thank you,
Well,
Betsy. Now-
thank you,
now I have
Betsy. It
something
was
to
really-
do this winter.
Thank you all
That's
very much. I
So
appreciate it. It was fun.
delightful. Thank you so
Very
much.
inspiring.
Thank you.
So
I
you
can't
guys are
wait
going down
try
to the
your
zoo?
ideas.
You going down to the zoo this
I
weekend?
don't think we're going to go to the zoo. We are going to go to the next Chester County outing, which is open to guests, by the way, also. And I think Jay is going to go to the Laurel Hill Cemetery in Philadelphia, which is a great place to photograph too. So I think we're going to skip the zoo though.
Yeah.
Just real quickly for people who are questioning this, including me, I just checked, and Adobe Camera Raw does indeed have the same new masking features as Lightroom. Therefore, that would be how to use that feature in Photoshop.
All right, I'm gonna check that out. Thanks.
Yeah, I've not heard any professional talking on the subject to mention that
Huh.
as a workaround.
So
Well,
thank
thank-
you, Barbara, for
Yeah.
thinking of that, wherever you are. Oh, there she is.
That was a great talk, Betsy. Thank you.
Yes, it was.
Great.
Really inspiring. Thank you so much, Betsy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, take care, everyone. Happy
Thank
New
you,
Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Thank
New Year.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you, Jay, for organizing that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm learning as I go.
Bye-bye.
Bye.